This is The Hour of the Starfish by Madeleine Engel, Chapter 4. No, Polly, darling, the canon said. Just others out. Oh, okay then. Adam, this is Polly O'Keefe. Polly, this is Adam Eddington, your father's new laboratory assistant. Polly stuck out a lean brown hand and shook Adam's. Her grip was firm and confident. Hello, Adam. Actually, my name's Polyhymnia. Isn't that an awful name to give anybody? And it's all Father Talus's fault. He's my godfather, and he christened me. It's surprising that I still love him, isn't it? I tell you all this so that you'll know that if you ever call me anything but Polly, I'll jump at you and kick and scratch like a wildcat. All right, Polly it will be, Adam said. Canon Talus said, Get your coat and hat, Paul. Polly looked out her window, which faced front on the modern street. Nasty, stinking, foul old rain, she said crossly, wheeled and took a navy blue Burberry and beret out of the closet. They stopped off on Adam's floor while he picked up his trench coat, then went out into the street where the canon hailed a taxi and furled his umbrella. With his furled umbrella. A lot of good it does us that way, Polly remarked. They got in a taxi, and the canon began pointing out places of interest. If we have time this afternoon, we'll go to the Plaza Mayor, and you can walk around a bit. That's where the Spanish Inquisition started, Polly said, and bullfights, and all kinds of icky stuff. It always gives me the shivers. Do we have to go there, Father? Don't you think Adam ought to see it? Oh, I suppose so. But I always seem to hear screams still quivering in the air and smell blood. She looked defiantly at Adam. I am not morbid. It's all right, Adam assured her. I think that places hold atmospheres too. You're nice, Polly said. I shan't mind flying to Lisbon with you after all. At least Father said that's what I'd be doing if it's all right with you. It's fine with me, Adam said. She was a queer kid, and he couldn't very well hurt her feelings. Something in the tone of his voice, though, seemed to make her dubious, so he added, Now I won't have to worry about recognizing your father. Polly laughed, a warm, deep chuckle. I look exactly like Daddy, string bean aspect and all. Some of Daddy's assistants have called him a long drink of water. That's me. The red hair and blue eyes, too, Canon Talus said, and with a little bit of luck, the looks of your mother and maternal grandmother. Oh, I don't really care about being beautiful, Polly stated, at least not yet. As they neared the Prado, which was a longer drive than Adam had anticipated, Canon Talus explained that although the museum was now in the city of Madrid, it was not too very long ago that it had been out in the country in the middle of fields. It was not at all what Adam had expected of one of the most famous museums in Europe. Not only was it utterly unlike the Guggenheim or even the Frick, which was only natural, it also bore no resemblance whatsoever to the Metropolitan, either in the building itself or in the display of pictures. He was amazed to find it an enormous, dirty, badly lighted place, the light even worse than usual now because of skies dark with rain. In room after room, there was a great jumble of masterpieces, El Grecos, Murillos, many of these looking like cheap religious Christmas cards, Velázquez's, Goya's, Raphael's, lesser-known painters, unknown painters, early work, middle work, later work, good painting, middle painting, bad painting, finished and unfinished painting, all thrown at the wanderer in one great saturating splash. Canon Talus was obviously familiar with every inch of the place, separating, sorting, explaining, ostensibly to Polly, but also for Adam. Polly stood in a room full of El Grecos, and turned around and around slowly. Then she stopped in front of a large painting of St. Andrew and St. Francis, the two of them standing together in obvious and direct communion. I'm staggered, she said, absolutely staggered. Father, why haven't I seen it before? She contemplated the picture again for a time in silence, assuming a junior version of Canon Talus's stance, her legs braced slightly apart, her hands behind her back. Of course it's impossible, she said. What? Adam asked. that they should be there like that, standing, talking together when they lived 1,100 years apart. But I'm so glad they are. It does make time seem unimportant, doesn't it? She turned to Canon Tallis and smiled. I'm sorry I was horrid about not going to Geneva with you, but we'll do it another time, won't we? Yes, he said gently. Yes, we'll do that, Polly. Just as Adam felt supersaturated, they paused for lunch in the museum cafeteria. This, at least, Adam found not unlike the cafeterias in the Met or the Museum of Natural History, except that it was much smaller, and the people automatically ordered a bottle of wine with lunch. Here, for some reason, the Canon and Polly switched into Spanish, so Adam joined them. Polly smiled at him warmly. Oh, good. I'm glad you aren't one of these Americans who refuses to speak anybody else's language. You speak awfully well. Thank you. Adam, do have a hamburger. Spanish hamburgers are the funniest things. The meat is even different. People who want some good American food, order them and then get them and then go into a state of shock. They say it's bad meat cooked in rancid oil. She grinned at the Canon and slapped her own hand lightly. I'm being judgmental again, aren't I? I'm sorry, but do try one, Adam. I find them absolutely cordon bleu. The hamburger was indeed unlike any American hamburger. Polly's milkshake, too, bore little resemblance to anything Adam had at home. He and the Canon had coffee. Without it, Adam by now could not have stayed awake, and fatigue multiplied the already existing confusion in his mind. Polly, like the hamburger and the milkshake, was unlike any American child Adam had ever met, but she had evidently spent most of her life abroad. It was obvious that she adored Canon Tallis, and he, in his turn, seemed to love her deeply. But Adam still was very unsure of the Canon. After all, a man in ecclesiastical garb could get away with murder. Well, perhaps not murder exactly. A lot more easily than anybody else. After lunch, they wandered around the museum for a little while longer. Adam's legs were beginning to ache with fatigue. He now felt only irritation at some of the pictures which were so badly hung that they could hardly be seen for the glare. Others, Adam found, he was squinting, one eye closed, his nose almost touching the canvas. In many of the rooms were smocked art students copying paintings. The Canon stopped by a young girl who was copying a Baroque Annunciation. She turned around and smiled at him brilliantly and warmly in recognition. He pressed one hand briefly against her shoulder, but neither of them spoke, nor did he seem to consider introducing her to Adam or Polly. They moved into the large rotunda full of statues, watched over by a uniformed guard. As Adam and Polly followed the Canon in, the guard moved over to them quietly, saying in English, My avocation and my vocation, as my two eyes make one in sight, the Canon replied. The exchange was so swift, their voices were so low, that no one but Adam and perhaps Polly were aware that anything had been said. Adam's retentive memory, the envy of his friends at school, came to the rescue now. For a moment he seemed to be back in the secret police room in the airport, with the grim-faced Canon speaking to the inspector. They rhyme, Adam thought suddenly. What he said with the inspector then, and with the guard now. I don't remember the words, but I'm sure I could get them and put them together and make 4 lines of them, and they'd rhyme. An A-B-A-B rhyme scheme. He looked at the Canon. The Canon looked at him. Neither of them spoke. It's familiar, Adam thought. It's vaguely familiar. Maybe something I had at school. If I could only figure out what it was, I think I'd know more what to think about him. The Canon pulled out a very plain gold watch with Phi Beta Kappa key on the chain. Something clicked in Adam's mind. But he's English. He shouldn't have a Phi Beta Kappa key. Not unless he went to an American university as an undergraduate. Not likely. So then he must be a phony, the way Callie said. Unless, well, it could be honorary, like Churchill's. I don't know. His eyes flickered back over the Canon. For the first time, Adam noticed the plain black, the priest's clothing was broken by a tiny red sliver of the French Legion d'Honneur ribbon in his lapel. This was possible. Old Doc had one too. "Time to go," Canon Tallis said briskly. Perhaps because of Polly's words, Adam was not too happy with the Plaza Mayor. Then again, it may have been simply the rain which dripped down the collar of his trench coat, though Canon Tallis tried to shield the three of them with his big black umbrella as they walked slowly about. The Plaza Mayor was a great, beautiful square, cobblestoned, with magnificent buildings, horses sadly pulling wagons, arches leading to narrow, winding streets, with shops and restaurants and laundry hanging out even in the downpour. Perhaps it was the sullen stream of rain which was responsible for the dark aura that Adam felt as he looked across the vast, echoing space of the square. It was almost 5 when they got back to the hotel, and Adam went up to his room to collect his things. When he opened his briefcase, which he had not taken to the Prado, he was quite sure that someone had gone through it while he was out, that his books were not as he left them. His first thought was to rush to Canon Tallis with the disturbing news. Then he realized, with a sudden jerk of the stomach, that the trip to the Prado might have been engineered by the Canon simply to get him out of the room. Adam went through the briefcase again, carefully. Nothing had been taken, but he was quite certain that its contents had been examined and then replaced as accurately as possible. When I get to Lisbon, he thought, I'll make some excuse, at least, to telephone Callie. If I see her again now, maybe I'll be able to sort things out. Downstairs, the Swiss airman and almost all the other passengers were already assembled. Those who had been going on to Geneva and Zurich, with the exception of Canon Tallis and Polly, had left, so it was a smaller group gathered together in the lobby. The perpetually pleasant Swiss airman told them that the bus was waiting, and that they would be taken to the airport and flown to Lisbon, and would be there in time for dinner. Since the canon was staying in Madrid instead of going on to Geneva, as originally planned, or even to Lisbon, there seemed to be some question about his being allowed to go in the bus with them to the airport. Adam felt like saying that he could take care of Polly perfectly well by himself, but at this point he thought it wiser not to cross the older man who was talking in a quiet but most determined way to the Swiss airman, who finally smiled and nodded, shook hands with the canon, and then ushered the passengers out into the rain and out to the bus. At the airport, the Swiss airman, still smiling, but beginning to look tired and harassed from all the questions being thrust at him, took them into the dining room where he told them to order refreshments, compliments of Swiss air. Adam sat at a large round table with Polly and Canon Tallis and 5 other passengers, so that the conversation was perforce general, and mostly about the weather. Bits of gossip flitted from table to table as the Swiss airman would appear, speak to one group, and then hurry off. The airport in Lisbon was still closed. The airport in Lisbon was open. The airport in Lisbon was open but might close at any moment. The airport in Lisbon was closed but might open at any moment. Strangely enough, the downpour in Madrid never seemed to be any concern. After a little over an hour had gone by, the Swiss airman came hurrying in and told the entire group in a voice now slightly hoarse that they would be served dinner since the airport in Lisbon was definitely still closed down. There was a small, smug, middle-aged couple at Adam's table who decided that they would like to stay on in Madrid and were furious when the Swiss airman wouldn't pay for their hotel or passage to Lisbon unless they traveled with the rest of the group. Adam was embarrassed by their rudeness and ashamed that they were American. Polly leaned sleepily against Canon Tallis, who sipped at a small glass of Tio Pepe. The Swiss airman disappeared again, and the table was quickly set and a full dinner served: soup, omelet, chicken, fruit, cheese. Adam discovered that he was starved. They were finishing their coffee when the Swiss airman appeared again, beaming like a Cheshire cat. A Spanish plane would take them up to Lisbon, where the airport was at last open. He hurried off. In a few minutes, the plane was called, and everyone trooped to the gate, where they were completely unexpected. Canon Tallis was trying to sort out the situation with the Iberian Airlines official when the Swiss airman came panting up. Wait! A plane was being flown in from Geneva for them. It was well after 10 when they were finally herded through the gate. Canon Tallis stood watching after Polly and Adam, and as they paddled out into the rain and onto the bus, stood watching until the bus was driven off. This time, it was more than a few yards to the plane. The bus began to gather speed, and although the rain was letting up and the atmosphere was lighter, it was not long before the dark figure of the cabin had disappeared. Polly turned anxiously to Adam. You will stay right with me, won't you? Yes, if you want me to. Why? Are you nervous? Adam asked, hoping to get some information out of her. Polly contemplated him as the bus jolted along over the wet ground. Finally, she said calmly, I have never traveled alone before, and after all, I am still a child. Adam felt like crying. Okay, child, why are you holding out on me too? But if he ever wanted to get anything out of Polly, it would not do to antagonize her now. Granted, she was an odd kid, but she was obviously a bright one, and he liked her. He knew that she liked him, despite the deliberate evasiveness of her last answer. Sooner or later, she would talk to him, as long as he didn't push her. Most people did seem to talk to Adam, which may have been one reason he wasn't more surprised at Callie's confidences, or at anything else that had happened. Giving him a wary look, Polly put her hand in his as they left the bus, and held it firmly until they were safely in the plane. A caravel, Polly said. You don't mind if I sit next to the window with you on the aisle, do you, Adam? It's just because I like to look out. Is that the only reason? He asked her, stowing her small blue case and his briefcase under the seats. Isn't it reason enough? She asked as he sat down beside her. It was to be a short flight, they were told, about 45 minutes. After they had been in the air less than half an hour, Polly said, I have to go to the washroom, Adam. He moved his knees to let her go by. At the aisle she stopped, started to say something, walked on for a couple rows, then came back. Watch after me, Adam, please, she said tensely, then hurried up the aisle and disappeared into the washroom. Adam had looked over the passengers, and a more normal lot, he felt, could not have been found. The original group was all American, vocal, and eager to be on their way. Only a handful of new passengers had been added, and none of these looked in the least sinister or even curious. The only figure who was even faintly colorful was a rabbi with a long, luxuriant growth of brown beard. He had a look of quiet dignity and sat, isolated in contemplation, until he turned to a book which Adam could see by straining was something by Martin Buber. Polly's small voice, as she had turned back toward him, made him a little tense. But after all, she was only a kid and a girl, and girls are apt to be hysterical, and that doggone cannon had evidently frightened her about something. He shook himself and settled back to read an article on Starfish, which old Doc had stuck into his hand that last day in Woods Hole. Adam could usually concentrate, but his eyes now kept flickering to the face of his wristwatch. After Polly had been gone a couple of minutes, he began to look back toward the washroom door every few seconds. After the hand showed 5 minutes had passed, he put the Starfish article aside and did nothing but look at the washroom. After another minute, he felt a distinct queasiness in the pit of his stomach and went to the back of the plane. The steward looked at him, saying courteously, The other washroom is empty, sir. Yes, Adam said. I'm traveling with a little girl. She's been in there several minutes, and I'm afraid she may not be well. The steward tapped lightly on the door. Nothing happened. Adam knocked rather more loudly. Polly, he called. Nothing. Not so loud, please, sir, the steward said. We don't want to disturb the other passengers. Just a minute, and I will unlock the door from this side. He took out a key, and after a certain amount of manipulation, the door swung open. The washroom was